I'm beginning to understand that worrying doubles suffering. And when I say that, I don't necessarily only mean worrying about the future, but also worrying about the past and almost dwelling on the past events that have happened. Honestly, I think that when you worry about things that happened in the past, you're doubling suffering that's already happened. And when you're worrying about the future, you're doubling suffering that hasn't happened yet. And I think that both of those things, they're just negative because we're just adding additional pain to ourselves that isn't necessary for our own experience and for our own learning and for our own growth. I think that it's important that we recognize the past and we learn what we can from it. But after we recognize what we need, I think that it's perfectly okay to forget and to move on from certain situations that we've been through. It's the saying, remember the lesson, forget the teacher. So I think that it's important that when we're looking at the past that we take the lessons that we can from it. But then after that, we just allow it to pass on because we're living in the present. And we recognize that every present and every moment in the present is an opportunity for change. And I think that in reference to the future, I don't think it's fair to ourselves for us to worry about things that have not happened yet. And I think that really just undermines our own peace in a way. Because I think that if you're constantly thinking about things that have not happened yet, then you'll never be able to exist where you are. You'll never be able to find joy in where you are, regardless of whether what you're worrying about is something positive or negative. And I mean that in the sense that if you truly believe that the future is going to be better than the present, and you constantly try to exist in that future, you're never going to be able to because the future doesn't exist. So you'll just be undermining the joy that you could be enjoying in the present moment. And when it's something negative, for example, if you're worrying about something in the future, there's no point in worrying about it if you're so sure that it's going to happen. Because if you're so sure that it's going to happen, then it's something that you could just deal with at a later date. It's not something that's necessary to worry about and to exist in within the present moment. And that's not to say that we shouldn't prepare for the future, because I think that's really important. But it's to say that in constantly living in the future and constantly living in the past, we're undermining the peace that we could have with ourselves today. And I think that regardless of whether what we're looking at is positive or negative, we'll never be able to truly find joy in the present moment if we're always living in reference to the present, or even in reference to the past and in reference to the future. The best example I could come up with is nostalgia, in the sense that nostalgia is a good feeling to have of almost reminiscing on the past and imagining the good times. But nostalgia can become a very dangerous thing when you're constantly living in reference to the past, always thinking, oh, what happened in the past is so much better than it is today. Well, that's only because you're not present enough to recognize what's good today. And I think that a lot of almost what we try to return to in the past is something that was a result of us being present. I think that so many people, myself included, we live in memory, in a positive memory of our childhood so much, specifically because it was something that we were present for. So I think that if we really want to experience that feeling again, it requires us to be present in the present moment. And it requires us to be present to experience new things, to make new memories, and to move on from the past. And in reference to the future, I just think that it's important that we don't stress about things that haven't happened yet. And I think that a lot of that, it's about letting go of control. Letting go of control of not necessarily who we are as people, but almost our own fate in a sense. And it's a bit paradoxical, but it's in the sense that once you do everything that you can do, then you just need to leave the rest up to God. And you need to have faith that everything will work out as it's supposed to. Because I don't think that we necessarily have the power to control anything outside of us. Even to an extent, I don't think we have the power to control ourselves, in the saying that you can't add a single gray hair to your head, you can't make yourself grow taller. So I think in that regard, it's just important that we try to be really present and almost we control what we can internally and in our actions to the greatest extent that we can. But other than that, we just leave the rest up to God, and we just have faith that everything will happen the way it's supposed to. And I think that when you let go of control, you finally become free. And in that becoming free, you're then free to experience the present moment because you recognize that you're doing everything that you can and everything else is not up to you. So regardless of whether you succeed or fail, you know that you've done everything that you can. And I think that there's a peace that comes into that. So, that's all just to say that I think that worrying double suffering. So I think it's unnecessary, and I think it's ultimately undermining ourselves if we're constantly worrying about things that have not happened yet, or worrying about things that have already happened, instead of trying to posit the change that we want to see in the present moment. I have a Bible verse prepared just for this video that I think relates to the topic a bit. It's taken from Philippians 4, verses 6 to 7, and it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus." So I just think that it's important that we just do everything that we can, and we leave the rest up to God to handle the rest. And I think that if we have a lot of faith, and if we have immeasurable faith beyond our own understanding, that everything will happen the way it's supposed to, then that'll ultimately allow us to experience the peace of success in our situations in the present moment. Thank you for watching. That's really all I had to say for this video. Just do what you can with what you have, and try to change in the present moment, and try to be present rather than existing in the past or in the future. Thank you.